Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the Flame Entertainment and Sports. It's your boy Rob here. Once again, we'll be recapping another episode of Bachelor in Paradise. A couple of days ago, we put out our recap of episode 2 of season 10, and now this will be the season 10, episode 3 recap of Bachelor in Paradise. So it started off from where we ended, on Monday night, where, it was a rose ceremony. Justin offered his rose to Susie. She said no. So then this episode resumes, and it's in that same time in the rose ceremony. Ultimately, Susie leaves. Justin, he's kind of crying in his room. Jesse Palmer's in there with him, trying to help him out. Jesse asks Justin if he wants to talk to Susie, and he says no. And then we see Susie come to one of the producers and say that that she wants to talk to him. But the producer lets her know that Justin does not want to talk to her right now. He's feeling very emotional, and, she's saying, oh, I could help him out. But ultimately, the two go their separate ways. Then Jesse does tell Justin that the rose is still available, for him to give it to someone like like a friendship type of rose. And then we don't see who Justin decides, but then Jesse appears once again to the rest of the contestants in the rose ceremony, and he lets Jill know that Justin wants to give the rose to her, as a friendship rose. Initially, Jill does not accept it, but ultimately she does, which was a shock. I feel like most people thought Jill would be going home due to her not really, having a connection with anyone, being that she was there for like a day or two, literally, and most people were coupled up already. So it's kind of hard for Jill when you think about it. But ultimately, she lives to fight another day. She receives a rose. And then, the following day, following the whole rose ceremony thing with Lexi, Justin, and Susie all leaving, we have a couple new arrivals come in. We have Andrew Spencer, who was on Katie Thurston's season, Bachelorette. He was also on the most recent season before this of Paradise. We also have Sean come in, who was on Charity Lawson's season, Bachelorette. Andrew, he talks to Bailey and talks to Alex. Bailey at the time is coupled up with Jeremy. Alex is coupled up with Jonathan. And he decides, I thought he was going to actually go on the date with Alex, but he decides to ask Bailey. She said yes. And then Bailey's like, before we go, I want to tell Jeremy, which I thought was super cool and, respectful, right? Of Bailey to do that. She goes to Jeremy to let him know, Andrew asked me on a date. I'm going to go with him. And then ultimately, Jeremy, he breaks down. He gets you can tell he's super mad. Yeah, it's a whole thing. He gets super offended. He's like, oh, you told me yesterday that you and me were strong, we're going to be together. And, I understand Jeremy, right? Because obviously, right, Susie's gone now. So then he's like, all right, I'm only focused on Bailey. But ultimately, to me, it's like, man, literally the day before, Bailey was super cool with you going on the date with Susie. She didn't cause any drama. She had no problem with it. She acted super cool about it. And then, now she wants to try something out with another guy. And all of a sudden, it's an issue. But when you did it, it was completely fine. And look, I'm not trying to, hate on Jeremy or nothing. Look, we're all humans. Nobody's perfect here. We all make mistakes. We all have our own philosophies and thoughts and all that. So I don't want this to be like, oh, I'm hating on Jeremy. I'm not at all, man. I haven't been in that position, so who am I to judge, right? But ultimately, from the outside looking in, right, from what was shown to us on the show, it was kind of like, damn, man, she allowed you to go on that date, and now you have an issue with her going on the date. And then ultimately, Bailey leaves and goes on the date with Andrew. They go on an interesting day. I've never really seen something like this, but it is reality TV at the end of the day. They basically go into this tub that's full of Costa Rican coffee, and they're basically in the tub hanging out there inside of coffee. It probably sounds completely made up how I'm describing it right now, but it is what it is. And I thought it was really cool. It seemed like they had a pretty cool vibe. They're both super easygoing, laid back. They're laughing a lot, smiling. It felt like it was a good time for both of them. Then back in the resort, we saw Jeremy just, after getting mad, at Bailey, we just saw him absolutely go off. He immediately wants to talk to Susie. He goes into the ITM room with a producer, and he's like, oh, can I call Susie? The producer hands him the phone, and, he calls Susie. She answers, and he's like, are you in the States yet? Are you still here? Whatever. And she's like, oh, I'm actually about to, get on a flight to head home. And he kind of tells her, I basically, I want you to come back, and I want to try things out with you. I feel like I made a mistake not giving you my rose last night. And ultimately, Susie's like, you know what? I don't think I could go back there. And ultimately, she decides to leave. And I think, I understand Susie, because you think of it literally the night before, all the drama that went down with her and Justin and Lexi. I could only imagine how much of a toll that took on her. And then all of a sudden, you think she's going to come back here to get into another love triangle when you really think about it with Jeremy and Bailey. So, I understand it for Susie. But yeah, and I do want to shout out, though, the producer, that did who was with Jeremy, and she actually came out for a second on screen was Natalie Butler, Shabtai Butler. I think I pronounced it right, but I've been following her for a couple years now on Instagram. Not too shabby. That's her Instagram. I wanted to shout her out. She's a great producer on the show, and I was super happy to see her come out on camera actually, and not just be behind the scenes that usually producers are. So shout out to Nat Too Shabby again. Go check her out on Instagram. She does great things there, producing for all the Bachelor Nation shows. Yeah, I'm glad I got that in there. But yeah, so ultimately, yeah, we had that drama with Jeremy and Bailey. So regarding Andrew, right? Like I said, he went on that date with Bailey, and of course Jeremy got upset. He called Susie. The whole thing happened. And the following day, we see a moment where Alex, she comes to like the realization that she doesn't really feel like there's a true connection between her and Jonathan. She opens up to him. She lets him know. Ultimately, the following day, Drew kind of, you see him flirting with Alex, and you could tell she's like into him, but she's also kind of upset because he did take Bailey on the date over her. But ultimately, the two, as the episode, continues, the two hit it off. We see them kissing in the pool, and we just get the sense, at least I get the sense that I think Andrew and Alex could be together for a while. I don't know throughout the whole duration, the rest of the season. We shall wait and see, but I feel like there's a strong connection there. And a couple I haven't talked about because I feel like they're so solid that there's not really much to get into. There's not really any drama. Spencer and Jess, shout out to them. I think their connection continues to grow episode in and episode out. Another couple, is Dale and Kat. There wasn't really much drama with them in this episode. They're another solid couple. In the preview, though, that they give at the end of this episode, we see that there is a fight. I don't know if it's in episode 4, episode 5, maybe another episode down the line between Dale and Kat, which is normal though. Like, to me, there's always going to be any type of relationship, whether it's romantic, friendship, whatever it may be. There's always going to be some sort of, argument from time to time, some disagreements. That's just how life works. And at the end of the day, to me, that shows you whether or not it's a true relationship, true friendship, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, so following, after Alex let Jonathan know, how she felt, Jonathan kind of started freaking out, you could call it, because the rose ceremony is the following night. And Alex is really the only girl he had really, formed a connection with. In the episode, he did go on a one-on-one with Jill, but ultimately he let her know that he saw it more as a friendship. Then all of a sudden, after Alex, lets him know that she's no longer interested in moving along with him, all of a sudden, you see him kind of going to Jill, and it kind of seems like he was desperate for a rose, being that the rose ceremony is tomorrow night. You could tell that Jill isn't really buying it. She kind of you could tell that she's not really feeling that it's genuine coming from Jonathan. And then he kind of goes off on her. And I feel that was kind of him, he was kind of taking his frustrations out on Jill. And, it wasn't necessary, but at the end of the day, just like I talked about with Jeremy, who am I or who are any of us to judge any of these people? We haven't been in their shoes. We don't know what they're going through on this national televised show. And, all the whole mental aspect is something that's not discussed. But at the end of the day, these are all human beings. At the end of the day, I'm just recapping the show, giving my thoughts, but I'm not here, like I said with Jeremy, I'm not here to hate on anyone or put any of these people down. I hope at the end of the day, this is all a learning experience for the people who don't find love on this show. I hope it's a learning experience and gets them closer to finding that special someone. And for the people who do find love, obviously on the show, amazing to see. But yeah, so Jonathan kind of, freaked out there on Jill. Ultimately, people were kind of watching him kind of go off on her. And speaking of Jill, she did go on a date on this episode. Like I said, she went on a date with Jonathan on episode 2. And then in this episode, Jill went on a one-on-one with Sean. So Sean invited her on the date. They went dirt bike riding, and they were on a beach drinking champagne together. And they kind of, hit it off. I thought they kind of hit it off, but to me, it felt more like a friendship type of thing. And ultimately, we'll see what that leads to in terms of Sean. Going into the date, in his ITMs, you could kind of tell that he was going to go with the girl who he felt would give him the best chance at getting a rose tomorrow in the rose ceremony. Ultimately, that as his initial goal, is kind of oh, okay, is this really going to be genuine? And then ultimately, like I said, the date, it did seem like both of them had fun together, but it felt more like a friendship type of thing. But ultimately, we'll see what happens, going forward with Jill and Sean. And then the following day, we had some more new arrivals, but this time it was actually the Golden contestants. And, they brought a lot of joy, amidst all the, Justin, Susie, Lexi drama. We had the Andrew, Jeremy, Bailey drama. It was great to have the energy of the Goldens there, because I feel like they're just there to have a great time. And, a couple of them did make some connections. April, I've talked about her on here multiple times. I was super excited to see her in Paradise. I just felt like Paradise was was the show for her, because she's kind of all out there. She doesn't care what anyone thinks. She's a beautiful woman. She just has a good time. Ultimately, she did kiss. I want to say the right names here. So she kisses Jack in the pool. She flirted with Kim. Ultimately, we really don't know what's gonna happen with April down the line. Is she gonna end up with one of these guys? We're gonna have to wait and see on that. And we did have a connection that did come even before April made her connections with these guys. Yeah, and the initial connection made between the Goldens here. So I didn't talk about this, but they arrived on a boat. It was a really cool type of arrival for them. But ultimately, we look on the boat and we see Natasha sitting on the lap of RJ. So for me right away, I was like, oh, are they like a couple already? And ultimately, like Natasha talked about it, they just happened to, strike up a conversation. They got in the boat, and ultimately she sat on RJ's lap. So that was pretty cool to see the Goldens coming in hot, and just ready to have some fun. We had Leslie, we had Cathy. There's a game in this episode. It was sponsored by the new, I Know What You Did Last Summer movie. It comes out on Friday, July 18th. Freddie Prinze Jr., Jennifer Love Hewitt from the first film, they're in it. And then the new coming cast includes Madeline Klein from Outer Banks. They do a whole little, promotional thing for I Know What You Did Last Summer. It kind of starts off with Jesse having like a nightmare where Wells is like trying to kill him. And then like his bathroom mirror, the words I Know What You Did Last Summer are on there. Then he goes to the bar to get a drink from Wells, and he's just like super creeped out. And then ultimately it goes into the game of this episode, which was the I Know What You Did Last Summer game. And basically what it was, they had each contestant write down a secret that nobody knows about them. And, a couple of them were pretty funny. It was nothing really crazy. And then ultimately we got to one where all the contestants voted to have that one exposed to see whose secret this was. And it ended up, the secret was, I slept with someone in the room next door to my spouse. And it ended up being Cathy, from the Golden Bachelor. Ultimately, Cathy, after admitting it was her, she wanted a chance to stay that night in the VIP suite of the resort, and she decided to take Keith with her. They had their own little pool there in their room. Outside they went in the pool. They had some champagne. They even did some swimming races and everything. You could tell Cathy is super fun to be around. She has great energy, and Keith, seemed like a super laid back, nice type of guy. And I feel like they really hit it off, and it was a nice little connection, a nice initial date, if you want to call it, between Cathy and Keith there. So that was really cool to see it. That was a new element, right? Episode 3, and it's the first time that after one of these quote unquote games, there's an actual reward. And someone I want to shout out is Reality Steve. I listen to him on a consistent basis, and he's been saying it since episode 1 that he feels there should be some sort of reward. Because at the end of the day, like, I agree with him. Like, these games are fun, but there's no really reward. Then, like, what's really the point, for the contestants or for any excitement on the show itself? So I feel like this game was probably the best one due to there being a reward. But with that said, each episode's gone on, and I feel like each game has gotten better. So shout out to the producers on that. I think they're getting better as time goes on. And yeah, overall, I've talked about the producers already, but I just feel, again, I talked about it in the 2 first recaps of this season, but I just absolutely love the cameras. I love the quality of everything, like how modern it looks. I love the upbeat type of vibe. I love the resort. I think it's great. Seeing them in their rooms as well, I think it's super cool. It's a new element to the show. Overall, I just love the whole production aspect of Bachelor in Paradise. It looks incredible, honestly. And yeah, it's been friggin' awesome to be being able to cover it here on the podcast for you all. We have another episode 4, Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern time on ABC. Make sure to keep it locked in here for all your Bachelor in Paradise updates. We'll be doing more recaps. And yeah, if any of you want to give your thoughts on any of the contestants, any of the drama, anything related to this season of Paradise, you want to give us your thoughts, make sure to let us know and hit us up on Instagram and TikTok at @theflame_ES. But yeah, guys, with all that said, it's going to wrap up, this Bachelor in Paradise Season 10, Episode 3 recap here on the Flame Entertainment and Sports. Once again, make sure to keep up with us on Instagram and TikTok at @theflame_ES. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Until next time, everyone, take care.